In the heart of Vienna, behind the polished marble corridors and golden chandeliers of an old imperial palace, there is a single door that tourists never see. It isn't on the tour maps, it isn't mentioned in the guidebooks, and most staff pretend it doesn't exist. But if you walk far enough down the Eastern Service corridor, past the portraits and behind a velvet rope, you'll find it. A plain wooden door with no plaque, no handle, just a faint outline in the wall. That is what remains of room 47. The palace itself dates back to the 17th century, but room 47 gained its reputation much later, during the turbulent years of the early 20th century. Back then, it wasn't sealed. It was used as a meeting chamber for politicians, officers, and advisors who shaped the fate of an empire. Decisions made in that small, quiet room sent thousands to war and altered borders on maps that still exist today. But the room's darkest legacy has nothing to do with politics and everything to do with what happened there in 1915. Archival records mention a young advisor named Lucas Voss, brilliant, ambitious, and deeply troubled. He was tasked with drafting reports on casualties from the front lines of World War I, summarizing human loss in neat columns of ink and numbers. Over time, colleagues noticed he stopped speaking much. He simply collected documents, disappeared into room 47, and emerged hours later, pale and withdrawn. Eventually, he requested to work in that room alone. One winter evening, a clerk went to deliver a folder of field reports to Lucas. He knocked on the door of room 47 and heard a voice from inside say, "Come in." When he opened the door, Lucas was standing by the window, staring out at the city, his back to the clerk. The clerk placed the folder on the table and asked if he needed anything else. Lucas said, without turning, "Do you ever wonder how much the walls remember?" The question unsettled the clerk, but he brushed it off and left. That was the last conversation anyone ever had with Lucas Voss. The next morning, the door to room 47 was locked from the inside. When the staff finally forced it open, the room was empty. Lucas was gone. There were no signs of a struggle, no open windows, no hidden passageways. But the walls were covered with writing. Every surface, from floor to ceiling, had been filled with dates, names, and locations. Handwritten lists of the dead. Thousands of them, more than could reasonably fit in a single night. Investigators assumed Lucas had suffered a breakdown, hidden somewhere, and written frantically for days. They searched the palace, then the city, then the river. His body was never found. His disappearance was quietly reported as a suicide, and room 47 was ordered to be cleaned and repainted immediately. But the painters refused. When they tried to cover the writing with fresh plaster, they said the ink bled through, no matter how many layers they applied. The palace brought in specialists. They scraped the walls down to bare stone and sealed them with new material. For a while, it seemed to work. The room was furnished again and used for minor meetings. But then, one by one, guests who stayed inside for more than an hour reported the same unsettling experience. They claimed they heard whispers, like a crowd murmuring just beyond the edge of hearing. Some said they saw faint writing reappear on the walls when the light was low. A few reported that while they sat at the table, they felt someone standing just behind them, breathing softly against their ear. By the 1930s, the room was avoided by nearly everyone. When the palace changed hands and regimes, room 47 became a storage space for boxes and forgotten documents. During the Second World War, part of the palace was damaged by bombing, and many rooms had to be rebuilt. Yet room 47 survived almost untouched. The only sign of impact was a thin, jagged crack stretching across the ceiling, like a vein of black glass. After the war, a young assistant archivist was assigned to take inventory of neglected rooms in the palace. Her name was Eva. She found room 47 listed in a file, but with no current key assigned. Curious, she went searching. When she finally located the door, it was stuck, swollen into the frame with age. She pried it open, coughing as a wave of cold, stale air rolled out. Inside, the room was nearly empty. Dusty shelves, a broken chair, a table pushed against one wall. But on the far side, above the table, she saw something that froze her in place. In the faint light, she could just make out writing emerging through the paint, as if something beneath the surface was pushing its way back into view. At first, it was only a few letters, then entire words, then line after line of names and dates. She stepped closer and felt the overwhelming sensation of being watched from all four corners of the room at once. Eva stumbled back and fled, leaving the door open. Later that week, she resigned without explanation and moved to another country. Friends said she refused to talk about her time at the palace, except for one strange comment she made to a colleague. Some rooms are not meant to be remembered, but they remember us. Eventually, the administration decided the simplest solution was to erase room 47 altogether. They removed it from floor plans, sealed the doorway with wood and plaster, and hung a large painting over the spot in the corridor. Official tours stopped before that section. Staff were instructed to ignore any questions about extra doors. The existence of the room faded from memory, replaced by a blank stretch of wall and a framed portrait. And yet, despite all of that, people still notice things. Some night guards report hearing the faint sound of a chair scraping against a floor from somewhere behind that wall. Others say that when the palace is empty and the corridors are dark, they've heard someone speaking softly in a language they can't quite recognize. The words are low, rhythmic, like the steady reciting of names. A few claim that if you stand in front of the painting long enough, a cold draft will creep out from the edges of the frame, as if the room behind the wall is exhaling. Archivists who dig deeply enough into the palace's history sometimes stumble upon references to Room 47 and the vanished advisor, Lucas Voss. They usually stop asking questions after that, not because there aren't answers, but because something about the story feels wrong in a way they can't define. As if the more you think about that room, the closer it gets. So the next time you find yourself in an old palace or museum, and you pass a stretch of wall that seems strangely longer than it should be, or a painting that feels slightly out of place, remember this: not every door is meant to stay visible. Some rooms are sealed not to protect you from history, but to protect history from you. And if you ever feel a cold breath on your neck in an empty hallway, you might be standing closer to room 47 than you think.